Hello and welcome. Today we delve into a story of hidden truths, dangerous intelligence, and a world on the brink of collapse. Inside a Berlin military office in 1943, a secret was about to shatter everything the Nazis believed about their war machine. Imagine a folder slammed onto a desk so forcefully that a porcelain coffee cup spills its dark contents, an act that reveals a revelation so explosive it could rewrite history. Could this document expose that American industry is producing one heavy bomber every hour, more than Germany can comprehend? Was there a hidden voice, a former German pilot turned insider, who knew that victory was already slipping away, not on the battlefield, but in the factories of the United States? How could decades of prejudice and arrogance blind the Nazi leadership to the true scale of American technological might? And what if their worst fears, an unstoppable industrial juggernaut, were already unfolding right under their noses, yet they refused to see it? The question remains, how deep did the blindness go? And could it be the very flaw that doomed the Nazi war effort? In this video, we will trace the path from secret reports and dismissed warnings to the devastating realization that the Allies' industrial power was beyond anything the Axis had ever imagined. We will uncover the false assumptions, the prejudiced dismissals, and the critical intelligence that foretold the coming collapse. The truth is waiting to be uncovered. Are you ready to see what lies beneath the surface? The most shocking revelations start now, as we begin with the moment that changed everything inside the Nazi intelligence hierarchy. On the 19th of March, in the year 1943, a tense and pivotal moment unfolded inside the stark, austere confines of a military intelligence office in Berlin. The scene was set in the dimly lit atmosphere of the ABAR headquarters, where the serious work of espionage and analysis was carried out under the relentless pressure of war. Suddenly, an ominous noise shattered the quiet. A folder with a weighty significance was forcefully slammed onto the polished mahogany desk, the impact resonating through the modest room. The loud bang disturbed even the steady calm of Admiral Wilhelm Canaris, who sat forward, sharply jutting from his chair as a visible shock registered on his weathered face. The force of the collision was so great that out of instinct, a porcelain cup containing coffee, invaluable fuel for his weary mornings, spilled its dark contents across the surface, leaving a stain that quickly spread across the rows of critical intelligence reports stacked on the desk. These reports, carefully compiled by spies and agents across the globe, contained information so sensitive that its discovery by the Gestapo would almost certainly mean his swift and brutal execution. Yet in this moment of chaos and revelation, Canaris understood that ignoring such evidence was not an option. These documents could change the course of the entire war effort. The intelligence folder, with its tightly sealed secrets, lay on the desk, threatening to upheave the Nazi regime's confidence and shake their perceived military invincibility. Canaris, a man known for his cautious prudence and seasoned intellect, looked through the tall windows of the ABAR headquarters, where outside the broad expanse of the Landwehr Canal shimmered under the weak sunlight. The canal was more than a body of water. It was a silent witness to history, for it was here, more than 2 decades earlier, that the corpse of Rosa Luxemburg had been dumped, marking a dark page in German revolutionary history. Now as the chief of German military intelligence, Canaris held in his trembling, unsteady hands a report that challenged the very foundation not only of Nazi propaganda, but of the entire intellectual architecture upon which German military strategy was built. The report questioned the supposed strength, resilience, and technological superiority of the Nazis' war machine. According to intercepted communications, conversations and messages from agents embedded deep within enemy territories, and from sympathizers in distant lands, the report disclosed a stunning reality. The information indicated that at the well-guarded Willow Run plant, operated by the Ford Motor Company in America, a staggering rate of production was occurring. One heavy bomber, B-24 Liberator, was being assembled every single hour. This aircraft, weighing approximately 18 tons, was composed of over 1.5 million individual parts, held together by around 150,000 rivets, and broken down into about 30,000 separate components, all assembled with astonishing speed. This manufacturing process was faster and more efficient than any military vehicle produced in Germany, let alone comparable industrial efforts. Fighting to keep his composure, Major Friedrich Wilhelm Heinz stood upright before Canaris's desk, purposefully presenting the intelligence reports for verification. With unwavering professionalism, he confirmed that the figures matched those previously reported. Nothing had diminished or changed. The news was clear and undeniable. American industry in wartime was operating on an unprecedented scale, manufacturing material at a rate that the entire German war effort struggled to comprehend or counter. What was not known at this pivotal moment was that this intelligence report would, in time, trigger the most catastrophic failure in Nazi warfare intelligence, an inability so profound that it would prove to be their ultimate downfall. This was the systematic blindness of the Nazi leadership to the true extent of American industrial capacity, a fatal flaw rooted in prejudice, racial biases, and a steadfast refusal to accept the reality of American ingenuity and economic power. Their misjudgment arose from deeply ingrained beliefs that the United States, steeped in democracy, was inherently weak, disorganized, and unable to sustain such a vast military effort. This blind spot had been steadily developing for nearly 2 years prior to this point. Back in 1941, General Karl Kohler of the Luftwaffe had presented Hermann Göring with intelligence reports from General Friedrich von Ascher, a military attaché stationed in Washington. These reports indicated that the United States was approaching a production rate of approximately 2,000 aircraft per month, an astronomical figure at the time. Yet Hitler's inner circle dismissively laughed at the idea, with Göring dismissing the reports outright, claiming Americans were only capable of manufacturing refrigerators and razors, not military aircraft. A few days after the attack on Pearl Harbor, during a meeting at the Wolf's Lair, Göring conveyed to Hitler his disbelief in the reports, insisting that America's democratic political system rendered it incapable of maintaining such wartime output. He argued that their heterogeneous, mongrel population made their economy inefficient, and the presence of Jews among them rendered their efforts corrupt. Based on these assumptions, Göring believed that their enemies could not possibly sustain the military production they claimed to. In the process of scrutinizing and interpreting the intelligence data, there emerges an enlightening perspective from a figure whose background uniquely positioned him to grasp the full scale of American industrial formidable. This individual was a former Lufthansa pilot, a seasoned aviator with first-hand experience of the skies over Europe and beyond. Prior to the outbreak of hostilities, he had spent a decade residing in the United States, providing him with an intimate understanding of American industry, technology, and infrastructure, insights that surpassed what most of his German counterparts could claim. His familiarity with American wartime progress gives his observations particular weight, especially when assessing the strengths and vulnerabilities of the Axis powers in the ongoing conflict. During the bustling years of the 1920s in Manhattan, this man lived in an apartment perched high above the streets, with a view that overlooked the majestic construction site of the Chrysler Building, then rising to breathtaking heights and destined to become an iconic symbol of American enterprise. From that vantage point, he watched the Americans erect what would soon be the tallest skyscraper in the world, a marvel of engineering achievement that had gone from groundbreaking to completion in less than 2 years. Such rapid development reflected not only their technological capabilities, but also their capacity for organized industrial effort, innovation, and efficiency, qualities that impressed and troubled those who understood their significance. This pilot, who was now reporting to Admiral Ritter, an officer of the German Navy tasked with intelligence operations, had access to critical and high-level information. Given the credibility of the sources he relied upon and his conviction that these reports were accurate, he believed that Germany, despite its formidable military efforts, had already lost the war. In his assessment, the outcome was now determined more by the unforgiving logic of mathematics and the relentless march of time rather than battlefield heroics or strategic guesswork. This conclusion cast a shadow of inevitability over the German war attempt, suggesting that victory was slipping beyond reach. The flow of intelligence narrates a story of covert channels that grew increasingly perilous, with each source more precarious and delicate than the last. Among these was Georg Nicholas, who was entrusted with the primary German espionage network operating in Mexico City for the Abwehr, the German military intelligence service. He had skillfully cultivated and maintained contacts among American businessmen, individuals who frequently traveled across the border between Detroit and Mexico's burgeoning oil-rich regions. Unwittingly, these businessmen became unwitting informants, casually sharing details about their visits, their business dealings, and their observations. These apparently innocent conversations, regarded as typical chatter by the Americans, were secretly being transcribed, analyzed, and transmitted back to the German spy apparatus by agents operating covertly within Mexico City. A notable incident exemplifies the danger and sophistication of this clandestine intelligence exchange. On the 3rd of February in the year 1943, Harold Morrison, a prominent American oil executive, was attending a reception hosted by the German-Mexican Commerce Associations in Mexico City. Over a few glasses of tequila, Morrison became relaxed and began speaking freely, unguarded about his recent visit to the Willow Run plant, a massive manufacturing complex established by Ford Motor Company in Michigan to demonstrate its capacity for producing military equipment and vehicles on a scale suitable to meet government wartime demands. His enthusiasm and pride in American industrial might lead him to provide a detailed account that was seized upon by a German agent, Wolfgang Blau, who was operating undercover as an Argentine leather merchant. Morrison, without realizing the gravity of his words, described in vivid detail the staggering scale of the Willow Run assembly lines. He explained that the facility's assembly line extended over a mile, an astonishing feat of engineering designed for mass production. The interior of the vast factory was so enormous that clouds would sometimes form inside it, and on occasion, rain would fall within the manufacturing space due to its size and complex infrastructure. Morrison reported that approximately 42,000 workers, including a significant number of women, some of them Afro-American women, were actively engaged in constructing the most intricate machinery ever devised. During the conversation, he instinctively reached for a pencil and began sketching a rough diagram of what he described, capturing the essence of the production process on a napkin. He elaborated that the aircraft being produced at Willow Run, particularly bombers, had 2 bomb bays capable of holding about 4,000 pounds of ordnance each, powered by 4 engines, each generating roughly 1,200 horsepower. The components for these complex aircraft were manufactured in sections, which Ford referred to as sub-assemblies, and these parts converged along the assembly line similar to the flow of rivers joining at the sea. Wing sections arrived from one direction, fuselages from another, and tail assemblies from yet a third, all systematically meeting at precise points along the assembly process to ensure seamless integration. Aware that the information was exceptionally revealing, the German agent listened intently and took detailed notes as Morrison described the meticulous coordination and scale of American aircraft production. The German spy, Wolfgang Blau, who disguised himself as an Argentine leather merchant, attentively recorded. The story unfolds with a diplomatic encounter at the Argentine embassy, where an unexpected interview took place. During this meeting, a man met Charles Sorensen, who was Ford's head of production and the visionary behind the renowned Willow Run plant. At that time, Sorensen believed he was speaking with a representative of a neutral nation, one that might be interested in purchasing aircraft after the war concluded. Given this assumption, he spoke quite candidly about the plant's manufacturing capabilities, sharing detailed insights without reservation. Little did he know, every word would be transmitted across the Atlantic and end up in Berlin within just a fortnight, courtesy of wartime espionage. It certainly was a remarkable moment that demonstrated how intelligence efforts could deliver even the most sensitive information. I personally visited the Consolidated Aircraft Manufacturing Facility in San Diego back in 1940, and at that time, they were producing B-24 bombers outdoors under the bright Californian sun. Each airplane was different from the next, assembled haphazardly, and the process demanded an astonishing 180,000 man-hours to complete a single aircraft. It was obvious to me then that this method could definitely be improved upon. A man named Gria, motivated by what he called professional interest and claiming to be a military engineer, had pressed Sorensen for specifics on the plant's operations. Recognizing his opportunity, Sorensen, proud of what he had achieved, willingly shared details. That night, after returning to my San Diego hotel room, I sketched out an entire blueprint for an improved production process. Instead of having workers swarm over a stationary aircraft, I envisioned assembling bombers on a mobile conveyor platform, akin to how cars are manufactured. In my design, the aircraft would glide past fixed stations where workers would perform specialized tasks repeatedly, refining their craft through repetition until perfection was achieved. This approach would greatly enhance efficiency and output. The Spanish engineer I spoke with had inquired about the challenges posed by such a complex and specialized workforce. Sorensen explained that they created an apprentice school, training around 8,000 workers each week to keep the operation running smoothly. He emphasized that women made up about 40% of the labor force, an indication of their crucial role. Notably, he mentioned that women often excel at detailed, delicate tasks, thanks to their smaller hands, allowing them to work more comfortably in tight spaces, and were also more patient with the monotonous repetition necessary for precision work. Additionally, the plant employed African American workers operating sophisticated machinery, and young boys, some as young as 16 years old, manage vital logistics and supply chains. Sorensen believed that democracy's core principle was about harnessing all available human resources, regardless of race, gender, or age, to maximize productivity. During wartime, intelligence on Willow Run's advanced manufacturing capabilities was vital for the Germans, who received consistent reports via various channels: Swedish engineers, Argentine sources, the Japanese, and Turks, affirming the plant's extraordinary output. Notably, Swedish engineer Erik Lundberg visited Willow Run in March of 1943 and reported that the plant operated with an efficiency that was almost unimaginable in Europe. He noted the countless resources invested in the facility, over 1,600 specialized machine tools, many designed for single specific tasks, all part of a staggering capital expenditure, estimated at around $200 million just for tooling alone. Measured and detailed intelligence came from different sources. For instance, Japanese commander Toshikazu Omi had sent coded messages to Tokyo through channels intercepted by German secret agents. These messages confirmed that Willow Run was producing more aircraft each month than Japan's entire aviation industry had ever managed. By April of 1943, German intelligence agents had compiled extensive data, sourced from no fewer than 17 independent reports, affirming the plant's incredible production capacity. The figures were startling. At its peak, Willow Run was manufacturing upwards of 650 B-24 bombers each month, and the overall U.S. B-24 output exceeded 1,400 aircraft per month. This intense level of intelligence gathering underscored the determination of the Axis powers to understand and counteract the Allied war effort. Nervous and eager for tangible, ground truth confirmation of the reports, the Germans and their intelligence allies authorized Operation Pastorius, an ambitious and clandestine mission involving the insertion of German saboteurs into the United States via submarine. The man leading one of the two four-man teams was George John Dash, a German-American who had spent 20 years living in America before returning to Germany in 1939. His instructions, secretly encoded and transmitted from the German military's Abwehr chief, Admiral Wilhelm Canaris, ordered him to gather detailed intelligence on American aircraft production sites before launching any sabotage operations. On the early morning of June 13, 1942, Dash's team reached their target area, an island near Amagansett, Long Island. Having disembarked from submarine U-202 just after midnight, they quietly made their way ashore, intent on executing their mission. The operation was part of Germany's broader effort. In a matter of only a few days, overwhelmed by the gravity of his mission and the disturbing realization of the immense capabilities of the Americans, Dash made the critical decision to surrender himself to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. This act of capitulation was not taken lightly, as it marked the culmination of intense internal conflict and the mounting evidence he had uncovered about the true scale of American industrial might. During his subsequent interrogation, Dash disclosed information that left his American captors utterly stunned and momentarily at a loss for words, reshaping their understanding of the enemy's production capacity. At one point, Dash relayed a startling assertion purportedly conveyed to him directly by Admiral Canaris, the head of German military intelligence, who confided that the German authorities in Berlin harbored deep skepticism regarding the authenticity of American production reports. According to Dash, Canaris had information suggesting that Berlin's military leadership believed the figures detailing American aircraft manufacturing, especially as they related to Willow Run, were mere propaganda fabrications. The Germans doubted whether the plant genuinely produced aircraft at the astonishing rate claimed, specifically one bomber every hour, viewing such assertions as exaggerated or even fabricated. The Nazi officials in Berlin demanded concrete proof, photographs, workforce counts, shipping logs, and other indisputable records that could compel them to accept the reality of these extraordinary claims. FBI Special Agent Charles Landman expressed his incredulity during the interrogation, asking in a tone of disbelief, "They don't actually believe that we're manufacturing a bomber every hour." Dash responded with a bitter chuckle, sharing his own frustration at the widespread denial among German officials. He explained to Agent Landman that he had personally witnessed American industrial ingenuity firsthand, visiting automobile factories where the production of vehicles at a staggering pace was routine. He tried to convince his German counterparts that if a company like Ford could produce a car every single minute before the outbreak of the war, it stood to reason that during wartime, the production rate could theoretically be proportionally increased, enabling them to manufacture a bomber every hour without issue. Yet despite such logical arguments, the Germans dismissed his assertions as defeatist propaganda, accusing him of undermining their morale and refusing to accept the truth he presented. The year 1943, notably April the 20th, marked a significant date for the German military and intelligence community, Hitler's 54th birthday. On this occasion, Admiral Canaris personally delivered critical intelligence briefings to General Göring at Karen Hall, an opulent and ostentatiously decorated hunting estate situated to the north of Berlin and owned by the Reichsmarshal. This meeting lodged itself into the annals of military history as one of the most infamous in German intelligence circles because of Göring's absolute refusal to accept the sobering evidence presented before him. Canaris, who carried with him a collection of photographs, intercepted documents, and reports gathered from numerous intelligence sources from across occupied territories and Allied lines, spread these artifacts across Göring's expansive dark oak table, each informant's contribution resembling a hand of cards in a game that they believed the Germans could yet win, but in reality was already lost. As he laid out the evidence meticulously, Canaris began cautiously, "Reich Marshal, we have confirmation from no fewer than 17 independent sources." He then pointed to photographs showing the assembly line at the Willow Run plant, which was allegedly churning out one B-24 Liberator bomber every hour during periods of peak production. These figures had been steady since the start of the year, January, indicating a fully operational industrial behemoth capable of sustaining such a formidable output consistently. Göring, who by this point in the war had ballooned to over 280 pounds, lifted one of the photographs, a long line of aircraft components stretching into the horizon, before looking at Canaris with palpable skepticism. With a tone of outright contempt, Göring questioned the credibility of the evidence, asking pointedly, "Do you take me for a fool?" His assumption was clear. He dismissively viewed the photographic evidence as nothing more than optical illusions or propaganda props, implying that the Americans might have been constructing mock-ups resembling aircraft, perhaps made of wood or other lightweight materials, to falsely demonstrate their production capacity. Göring's dismissiveness culminated in the crude assumption that the Americans could only be producing about 50 bombers per month at Willow Run, an estimate that starkly contrasted with the claims supported by the intelligence campaign. Canaris, undeterred, proceeded to extract more evidence from his collection. He produced an intercepted shipping manifest from the Pennsylvania Railroad, clearly delineating large aluminum shipments directed toward the aircraft plant. "Reich Marshal," he explained, "they are consuming approximately 16 million pounds of aluminum each month at this single facility. This amount surpasses our entire monthly domestic aluminum production, which is a shockingly scalable insight into their industrial capacity." To Göring, who was already inclined to dismiss these findings, this came as a blow, prompting him to mockingly ask where the Americans obtained such vast quantities of aluminum. Hitler's typical response was always marked by a mixture of disbelief and defensiveness. When presented with evidence and calculations, he would often dismiss them out of hand rather than acknowledge their implications. Admiral, in one such exchange, attempted to explain that while the Americans had demonstrated remarkable efficiency in the mass production of simple items, such as automobiles and refrigerators, they could not possibly replicate the manufacturing of complex warplanes like bombers with the same speed. After all, an airplane was not just a basic machine. It demanded precision engineering, skilled craftsmanship, and unwavering dedication, factors that could not be hastily or superficially assembled. Hitler's retort was swift and unwavering. On our side, it took us 6 long years of relentless preparation and development to ready our forces and factories for war. The Americans, in contrast, claimed they had achieved this impressive feat in merely 16 months. Such a claim, he argued, was beyond the realm of possibility. It simply defied common sense and the limits of industrial capability as he understood them. General Jodl, who had been analyzing Canaris intelligence figures with great care, then attempted to break down what little reliable data they had. He made a careful calculation, taking into account only a quarter of the figures that seemed to be credible. Still, even with this reduced estimate, he believed the numbers must be false. Hitler, however, was quick to cut him off. He was convinced that the truth of the matter was far more monumental. The United States had entered the conflict in December 1941, he pointed out, and attempting to build a seemingly miraculous factory, such as the Willow Run plant, and reach such a rapid level of production within such a brief period was unrealistic, bordering on impossible by all known methods of industrial capacity. Unbeknownst to the Nazi leadership, however, there were covert sources of intelligence that told a different story altogether, sources that had managed to breach American secrecy. The German intelligence service had obtained film footage secretly captured of Willow Run's operations, material that was smuggled from Switzerland via clandestine channels, including diplomatic pouches passing through Spain. This footage, only about 5 minutes in length, was a rare glimpse inside the massive assembly line. Canaris and his trusted deputy, Hans Oster, watched the film in a secure, locked room within the headquarters known as Abwehr. As they viewed this grainy yet revealing footage, the camera traveled along an astonishingly long assembly line, over a mile in length, showing B-24 bombers in every stage of construction, moving steadily. Men and women of different races, including both black and white workers, performed their tasks with mechanical, almost robotic precision. The timing was meticulously confirmed by a clock appearing in several shots, emphasizing how synchronized and efficient the operation had become. Astonished Asta, one of Canaris' associates, whispered under her breath, "My God, it's true." As she took in these images, Canaris, lighting his cigarette lighter, watched as the film burned in his hand. His emotions were complicated. He was both in awe of the industrial achievement and deeply troubled because, in the wrong hands, such footage could be used as powerful evidence of American military strength. Yet he knew they could not afford to show this to foes or allies alike. They might accuse them of fabrication or propaganda, or worse, of treason. By November of 1943, German intelligence had advanced further in their assessment. They managed to obtain aerial photographs of the Willow Run site, taken covertly by a Spanish diplomat operating in the United States. Carefully analyzing these images over several weeks, the experts in German aerial intelligence were able to draw a detailed picture of the factory's formidable scale and activity. The photographs revealed parking lots filled with roughly 12,000 cars, indicating multiple shifts operating continuously around the clock. Adjacent to the main facility, completed B-24 bombers could be clearly identified, ready for deployment, about 47 of them, aligned neatly on the nearby airfield with precision. The assembly lines inside the factory itself were visibly through skylights, and their layouts matched perfectly with the detailed reports received previously. The spacing of the aircraft, the arrangement of materials on rail sidings, and the delivery of countless freight cars, crammed with raw materials, confirmed that the plant's capacity far exceeded earlier official estimates. Hartmann Werner, a knowledgeable analyst, reviewed these aerial images thoroughly and wrote an internal report stating, "Photographic evidence aligns with human intelligence sources. The production rate appears to be consistent with the data we've collected. It is recommended that we immediately reassess our strategic posture in light of this insight and adjust our military plans accordingly. However, Goering, a high-ranking officer, dismissed these findings outright. He suspected that the images might have been manipulated, perhaps through clever tricks of photographic scale models or other deceptive techniques. His skepticism reflected the deep-seated disbelief that the Germans held toward the notion that the Americans could achieve such rapid and large-scale production. Meanwhile, Dr. Albert Speer, during the height of World War II, the scale of Allied aerial efforts was immense enough that, on average, only 4 bomber aircraft alone managed to drop the entire heavy bombing tonnage over London every single day. This staggering figure highlights the relentless and overwhelming air power that the Allies contributed to the war effort. Specifically, on Christmas Eve of the year 1943, the German military intelligence under the command of Admiral Wilhelm Canaris received a detailed forecast from the Americans regarding their projected aircraft production for the upcoming year. These figures painted a picture of colossal industrial might, showing that the United States planned to produce approximately 18,000 B-24 Liberator bombers, 12,000 B-17 Flying Fortresses, 1,000 B-29 Superfortresses, and 40,000 fighter aircraft. In total, this amounted to an astonishing 86,000 aircraft, a number that seemed almost inconceivable at the time. When these figures were presented to Adolf Hitler, his reaction was one of disbelief and incredulity. He dismissed the American claims as absurd, convinced that no nation had ever produced such quantities of aircraft, let alone in a single year. By the time February of the following year, 1944, the German intelligence apparatus underwent significant personnel changes. Canaris was removed from his position amid suspicions of defeatism and treason, accusations that were arguably justified given what the reality of the war was revealing. His replacement, Walter Schellenberg, a staunch Nazi loyalist, was a man who dared not voice disagreement with Hitler or the Nazi leadership, thereby effectively silencing any internal dissent. However, the brutal truth of the Allied aerial offensive could no longer be hidden from view. On February the 20th, 1944, which proved to be a pivotal week during the war, the American 8th Air Force launched a sweeping operation known as Operation Argument. This grand assault saw over 1,000 heavy bombers carefully dispatched to strike at vital German aircraft manufacturing plants. Over the course of just 6 days, this relentless aerial campaign dropped more explosive tonnage than the entire Luftwaffe had expended during the entire Blitz offensive against Britain. This meant that in a matter of days, the Allies inflicted an enormous blow to German aircraft production capacity. Fighter pilot Adolf Galland, a notable Luftwaffe officer, vividly reported observing over 800 bombers in a single formation, emphasizing the real threat posed by the American air offensive and the devastating power they wielded. As the tide of the war continued to turn, the Allied air strength showed no signs of waning. On D-Day, June the 6th of 1944, more than 11,000 aircraft of the Allies gathered above France, providing crucial support for the invasion. In stark contrast, the Luftwaffe could only muster fewer than 300 fighters to respond in defense of German-occupied territories, a numbing disparity that spelled doom for the German aerial forces. Field Marshal Hugo Sperl, commander of the German air defenses, sent a desperate and ominous message directly to Berlin, admitting that the enemy's aerial superiority was absolute and implicating the German intelligence efforts for their severe misjudgment. He confessed that their intelligence framework had proven to be fundamentally flawed. The deception did not come solely from the Americans, but from within their own ranks, an internal failure that proved decisive. By April of 1944, the great American aircraft assembly plant at Willow Run had reached its peak production capacity. During that month, a dedicated workforce operating in 2 9-hour shifts, 6 days a week, assembled a total of 453 aircraft. This frenetic pace of production meant that, on average, the facility was completing 1 B-24 Liberator every hour in 3 minutes, a staggering achievement in industrial output. The plant employed over 42,000 workers, including about 11,000 women, who comprised roughly 26% of the total labor force. The workforce also included approximately 3,800 African American workers, representing around 9%, and about 1,200 workers with disabilities, accounting for approximately 3%. This diverse demographic profile starkly contradicted Nazi racial ideology, which held notions of racial superiority and inferiority. In reality, the so-called inferior races and weaker social groups were producing military hardware in far greater numbers and efficiency than the so-called master race of the Germans. Following the war's end, the secret revelations of German intelligence officers underscored the extent of their failure and self-deception. On the victorious side, Walter Schellenberg, who had served as the Nazi boss of foreign intelligence, testified at the Nuremberg trials that by the early months of 1943, the German leadership was fully aware of America's extraordinary industrial output. All competent intelligence officers understood that these numbers were accurate, yet their reports were often ignored or suppressed because acknowledging the truth threatened to undermine the ideological fabric of Nazi racial superiority. As Hans Oster recounted in his memoirs, the real tragedy was not the lack of intelligence. Indeed, they were. During the tumultuous years of global conflict, one of the most pivotal revelations in military history revolved around the effectiveness of Allied industrial capacity, especially that of the United States, and how its true scale was systematically underestimated by the German military leadership. This misjudgment had profound consequences, shaping strategic decisions and ultimately influencing the war's outcome in ways that are still analyzed and debated today. A comprehensive survey conducted by the United States concerning their strategic bombing campaign confirmed what German intelligence units had suspected but were reluctant to fully believe. During the years spanning from 1942 to 1945, the immense industrial effort that Americans dedicated to aircraft production became glaringly evident through this survey. Willow Run, the legendary manufacturing complex, was responsible for producing a staggering total of 8,685 B-24 Liberator bombers within this 3-year period. At the peak of its productivity, the plant managed to produce approximately 650 of these aircraft every month, a level of output sustained consistently over many months, a true testament to American industrial might. Remarkably, the cost per aircraft fell dramatically from approximately $238,000 to about $137,000, reflecting significant efficiencies gained through mass production and technological innovations. Despite such undeniable evidence of American industrial strength, why did German intelligence refuse to accept and trust these reports? Albert Speer, the notable figure in post-war interrogations, was asked this very question. He pointed out that accepting the reality that Ford, an American automaker, an industrial giant, could produce a bomber every hour would be to confront a series of ideological and worldview-shattering truths. It would mean recognizing that the American democracy was not inherently fragile or weak, but remarkably resilient and capable of extraordinary feats of production. It would challenge perceptions that racial mixing, conceptualized as a source of societal weakness, actually fostered strength and diversity. It would imply that women, such as the many who entered the industrial workforce during wartime, could perform roles traditionally reserved for men. Perhaps most disruptive was the notion that America had initiated a conflict it could never permanently lose. The idea that its industrial and military capabilities far exceeded what some leaders believed possible. Accepting this reality would have forced Germany to reevaluate its entire strategic doctrine, a prospect too unsettling for many to face during the war. One might consider the inspiring figure of Rose Willie Monroe, who, in her lifetime, served as a real-world embodiment of Rosie the Riveter. Monroe operated a rivet gun for the B-24 assembly line at Willow Run, and like countless women of her generation, had never previously engaged in factory work before the attack on Pearl Harbor compelled the United States to mobilize all available human resources. As Monroe recounted in an interview conducted in 1984, they all knew they were building something of extraordinary importance. Every rivet they hammered into the aircraft was a small but vital part of the collective effort to bring an end to the war. Sometimes they worked through double shifts, even sleeping in the parking lot between the end of one shift and the start of another, driven by a shared purpose. Many of these women's family members, brothers, husbands, sweethearts, were flying missions in these very planes, forging a deep personal connection to the immense significance of their work. The tragedy with hindsight was that the disbelief in the intelligence reports about Willow Run's production capacity had catastrophic consequences for the entire Allied strategy. It meant underestimating the strength and production of the German Air Force, allowing Germans to continue manufacturing bombers into late 1944 rather than being aggressively countered earlier. This misguided assumption led to poor resource allocation, wasted resources devoted to wonders and advanced weapon systems that lacked practical utility instead of strengthening the most effective defenses. Additionally, strategic planning suffered from this flawed perception. Operations were devised based on the assumption that facing hundreds of enemy bombers was the worst case, not thousands. Such miscalculations compromised efficiency and effectiveness. Diplomatic missteps also stem from an inability to interpret and accept the true magnitude of the threat. Peace overtures were delayed because Allied leaders failed to comprehend the extent of Germany's capacity for defeat at that stage of the war. Meanwhile, German economists and military analysts who gained access to captured documents made shocking discoveries. They learned that the entire scale of American production at Willow Run alone had cost around $200 million, an amount exceeding the entire German aircraft industry's investment of approximately $400 million from 1933 through 1945. The vastness of the factory's footprint alone, 3.5 million square feet, surpassed the combined total of all German aircraft manufacturing plants, which cumulatively measured about 8 million square feet. The electrical consumption of Willow Run was prodigious, averaging around 2.5 million kilowatts each month, a quantity that meant the Americans had constructed a single factory consuming more power than entire German cities. As the war drew to a close, the full scope of the American industrial effort was finally laid bare. The final tallies revealed that approximately 18 history provides us with profound lessons that remain relevant across generations, serving as a stark reminder of the dangers inherent in certain cognitive shortcomings. One of the most significant of these is what we call cognitive bias, the tendency of individuals and institutions to interpret information in a way that aligns with pre-existing beliefs, often rejecting or ignoring evidence that contradicts their core worldview. This phenomenon, commonly referred to as ideological blindness, illustrates how deeply political or ideological convictions can distort our perception of reality, sometimes to a disastrous extent. For instance, a steadfast adherence to a particular ideology can override empirical data, even when the facts are clear and unequivocal. A phenomenon where mathematical evidence and objective truths are dismissed because they threaten cherished beliefs or narratives. Systemic failure often arises from this very dynamic. When intelligence agencies, organizations, or leadership circles develop systems designed to suppress or dismiss inconvenient truths, they inadvertently foster an environment where comfortable illusions take precedence over harsh realities. These safeguards against discomfort can, over time, lead to destructive complacency and poor decision-making. Such an environment rewards self-deception, making it possible for critical mistakes to go uncorrected until they culminate in catastrophe. One of the gravest errors a nation can commit is underestimating the resolve or capability of its adversaries, assuming weakness or overconfidence when, in fact, destruction lurks just around the corner. Take, for example, the story from the mid-20th century, which underscores these lessons vividly. During the dedication of the Yankee Air Museum at Willow Run in 1985, an event marked by reflection and historical commemoration, a poignant encounter took place. Rose Willow Monroe, who had been a notable Rosie the Riveter during the war effort, met Hans Rudel, a former Luftwaffe pilot from Nazi Germany. Rudel famously asked her how the United States managed to produce so many aircraft, specifically bombers, so rapidly. Monroe's straightforward response was, "Honey, we just went to work every day and did our job." Her words encapsulate a simple yet powerful truth. Democracy is fundamentally about ordinary, committed individuals doing their best day in and day out. Nothing overly complex or elitist about it. Rudel, however, responded with a startling assertion rooted in a deep-seated belief thesis often propagated during wartime. namely that democracy was inherently fragile, weakened by its diversity and perceived inefficiency. He claimed that his own country had been misled into believing that democracy made them vulnerable, lies that, according to him, resulted in millions of unnecessary deaths. To reinforce his point, Rudel recounted that the Nazi regime was told these narratives, which turned out to be terribly false. It was made painfully clear, in hindsight, that these beliefs were deadly. In May of 1945, as the war in Europe reached its catastrophic conclusion, American intelligence officers uncovered a final German report, dated on Hitler's last birthday, April 20th, that testified to the strategic impact of American wartime production at Willow Run. This report confirmed the production figures of the aircraft, confronting the German war machine with stark facts. Yet this intelligence was dismissed or ignored at the time, undermining the critical importance of the truth. Just 2 years earlier, the Allies had relayed this truth, but it was met with disbelief, illustrating how deeply entrenched ideological denial can be. Germany's defeat did not stem from a lack of intelligence, but from the fundamental failure to accept and truly believe uncomfortable truths. Truths that oppose their narrative of strength and invincibility. This tragic pattern persists. The failure to accept reality as it is, rather than as we wish it to be, often leads to devastating consequences. By the time the Germans had decided to confront reality, Hitler was confined within his bunker, and the Third Reich was teetering on collapse. Thousands of American bombers, many of which had been produced at Willow Run, delivered the decisive blow, delivering the final argument that German intelligence, despite its sophistication, had failed to heed. Their own contingency plans confirmed the formidable power amassed against them. The historical verdict is unequivocal. While German intelligence was remarkably capable and accurate in its data collection, widespread acceptance of these facts was catastrophic. The refusal to believe in what was uncomfortable, truths that contradicted national propaganda, ultimately led to the downfall of the Nazi regime. This monumental failure to confront reality underscores an essential truth applicable to all nations and eras. Reality does not bend to beliefs or ideologies. The universe operates independently of our desires or perceptions. In a more abstract but equally vital sense, these lessons serve as a warning. Dismissing uncomfortable truths in favor of comforting illusions or ideological narratives is a perilous course. Nations, organizations, and individuals that deny hard facts, no matter how inconvenient, are doomed to failure or destruction, for truth is inexorable. History demonstrates that denial, coupled with persistent refusal to accept reality, results in tragic outcomes. The legacy of Willow Run and the victory it helped catalyze reminds us that a robust, free, and diverse society is not just resilient,